This video world, I am SYED and you're watching Fault Lines. Water disputes and water crisis are giving birth to many conflicts everywhere in the world, and it's becoming increasingly a serious subject, a point of concern for many organizations as well as many countries. Recently, Iran and Afghanistan had a skirmish over a water problem. A problem between Iran and Afghanistan is taking place because of the division of Helmand River water, for which both the countries have a treaty since 1973. Apparently, 3 lives have been lost in this conflict, but as it seems, this is going further deeper as both the countries are still have the forces engaged from both the sides. According to statistics, 95% of Iran's land is facing water scarcity situation. Afghanistan, on the other end, is facing one of the most serious droughts in its history. To talk about this and more, we have a robust panel of guests in our studio at the moment. My first guest in the program is Dr. Rashid Wali Janjua. He's an expert of Middle Eastern affairs and talks frequently about the issues of Iran. Dr. I welcome you to the show. And with him, I have Saddam Hussein, who is an independent analyst and writes frequently about the affairs of Afghanistan. Saddam, I welcome you to the show.
Thank you.
Dr. First things first. So, Iran, a country that is trying to overcome the problems that it has, the economic problems, the political issues, is now having a heads-on skirmish with Afghanistan. Tell us about the background of the issue at large.
You see, the background of this particular issue is within the big matrix of 4 issues that bedevil the relations between the 2 countries. And those are water sharing issues, narcotics smuggling, then Afghan refugees, and the sectarian element. So, you must also remember that this was a frontier. Traditionally, Iran considers this as its backyard. And since millennia, the influence in Western Afghanistan has been a very, palpable part of this interstate equation. And if you see in 1872, once these frontiers were demarcated and stabilized during the reign of Shah Qajar of Iran, ever since then, there have been certain enclaves which are disputed. And the 3 major crossing points, Islam Kila, Farabi crossing, and this particular Milak Zaranj. So, these have been the crossing points where organized crime, smugglings, refugee issues, these all combine to create a kind of a combustible mix which any small event can trigger. But we should not read too much into this one isolated incident, because the Nimroz province with abuts Afghanistan, this is a place where maximum narco activity takes place. So, during the Taliban regime, things have been stabilized, consolidated, and during the US occupation, this region was also not very restive because of this kind of a conflict economy, the narco trafficking and all. But now things are becoming a little different. One, that Afghanistan is in the grip of humanitarian crisis. They have their economic issues. Their assets have been frozen. So, willy-nilly their reliance on informal economy and a kind of a laissez-faire economy has become more palpable. We see that Afghan Taliban have their fighters, and they don't have even money at places to pay them. So, it's a kind of a loose franchises which are operating on all the borders. We saw on Chaman border also, there were firing incidents against Pakistan also. And this is also one of the incidents. But its origin specifically is in the water sharing issue, which is based on the dwindling supply of waters from the Afghan region, because it's a consequence of climate change also. A dam was built, and dam was started during Taliban's time.
In 2021.
Yeah, it was finished in 2020. It was started much earlier. And this dam is 27 megawatts. It has water supply sources which are for the farmers of Afghanistan who are also famished. Desertification is taking place, and they dig canals, and sometimes those canals are construed as taking away the waters which ultimately had to flow into Lake Hamoon, which straddles Iran-Afghanistan border. Lake Hamoon is the largest freshwater lake, and which is not one lake per se, but it's a combination of small lakes, which is very essential for Sistan Balochistan, which for several other reasons has been a restive province. So once this water gets dwindled, at the local level, there are clashes, and I think this was one clash.
Dr. Allow me to take Saddam into this conversation. Saddam, Dr. was talking about the economic crisis, not only about the formal economy of Afghanistan that we were talking about earlier, but also about one of the greatest famines that the country is facing for more than 2 years now. So tell us how this economic issue is creating problems for Taliban's government.
They are obviously creating problems for the Taliban government, but the issue which we were discussing, Iran-Afghanistan, it has emerged from it. For example, the Taliban regime are now waiting for the recognition, but it's too long that they have not been recognized, but informal diplomacy is going on. So I guess the restarting of the Bakhshabad dam, which was started earlier, but it got stagnated due to war situation and troops withdrawal. So it is the first signal that they are in control. And dam is important for irrigation, dam is important for income generation, dam is important for generating electricity. So they want to signal that they are in control, they can carry out the development projects and the big development projects on their own. And it has obviously advantages for the people of the country. So I was reading like 25 to 30% of the people will benefit from this, like their incomes will increase and irrigated land will expand. So this, I guess, this created the the tight position or the strict position that both countries are taking. Iran is worried that their water inflow will be compromised, but on the other hand, the Taliban regimes are assertive and playing on the front foot, because if they play on the back foot, that would be a signal that they are weak, their government is weak. There was like threat from Iran and they are playing on the back foot now. So they are not playing on the back foot, they are more assertive. But if you look at the history, there was informal understanding between Iran and Afghanistan about the Helmand River, which was the major river, 1,000 kilometers long. And it is called the lifeline of water in Afghanistan, and Iran heavily depends on that water as well. In 1973, there was a treaty which was never ratified, but there was a treaty that 850 million cubic meter of the water will be shared with Iran, which frankly, I was just reading the reports that Iran has been getting 40% more because of the war situation, etc. So nobody was checking how much water is going on, and nobody was bothered as such. It's okay. And there was a kind of understanding, okay, the neighborly countries for the goodwill. So Iran is getting 40% more water than it was agreed in the 1973 treaty. But now we know the flow of rivers across the globe because of the climate change has been low. Similar situation in Pakistan, Afghanistan. So Iran is worried about its drought situation. Afghanistan is worried about drought situation and economic situation. So it is very important for Afghanistan, but Iran is equally worried about the future. I see it as a silver lining in the cloud. I see it as a window of opportunity, because Afghanistan was in war for 3-4 decades. So I guess this is an opportunity that Iran proactively should negotiate with all neighbor countries, because it is upper riparian with Pakistan, with Iran and some Central Asian states, and there is no understanding. So I guess Iran, the Taliban regime should acknowledge it, and it should proactively engage with neighbors to have some understanding with all the neighboring countries it is sharing water
Dr.
with.
Pakistan has been quite excited to bring Taliban into the mainstream of diplomacy. We hosted 2 international conferences. We hosted OIC, and we're still doing a lot of efforts. Rather we got the similar response from Afghanistan or not, but do you see similar kind of excitement in Iran, as you have yourself identified a couple of issues, which includes the refugees issues and sectarian issues? Or do you see Iran less excited when it comes to Afghanistan? We don't see them on the forefront like Russia, China and Pakistan.
Iran is by temperament not an excitable nation. They are very millennia old diplomatic ethos that they are steeped in, and I think they are proceeding very, very cautiously. During 92 to 96, it was entirely a different policy that they followed, and as soon as the Americans came, 2001, they were initially very active in the Bonn process to let Hamid Karzai step into the power corridors. But soon after, once they were branded as part of axis of evil by the Bush administration, they adopted a more nuanced policy, wherein they started kind of a rapprochement with Taliban through covert means, and started establishing kind of leverages with them. And for them, their eastern flank was protected because of Taliban's resistance. And they hosted, they say that 0.8 million registered refugees and 2.3 million unregistered refugees. And contrary to what Pakistan did by way of establishing big refugee camps, they did not use that approach, but they integrated them. So that refugee diaspora also acted as a leverage that they had on Taliban, and it still has. Now, coming over after this Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, Iran is viewing the situation very cautiously, and it's adopting a very balanced and a stable approach. At one place, it doesn't want to rile up Taliban and doesn't want to get entangled into sectarian conflict, because there are 4 million Hazaras which have that sectarian affinity with Iran. In the past, Iran has been supporting Northern Alliance also, them also, but now it's not following that policy. It's having a good relations, and despite this border provocation, and one of the statements by Brigadier General Komyar, Iranian local commander, that Iran might have to review its security policy. The Foreign Minister Hussein's statement is quite circumspect. He said that peace and stability, that is the aim, and conflict is not the aim of Iran. Iran is also very cautiously seeing this entire situation because of regional connectivity. It would like to be part of SCO as a full partner, and if it has to develop economic linkages with Iran, with China, it is looking at SHABAHAT ports, full utilization, and that north-south corridor linkage as far as Russia. So that makes Iran a very cautious actor at the moment, and Pakistan's interest also lies that a regional consensus is forged.
Dr. Shab, I would like to take Saddam's quick take on it. Saddam, very quickly, Dr. Shab is talking about connectivity. Now, when you talk about connectivity, it goes up with the preamble that the law and order and security situation is entirely in the grip and control of the regime that is in power, particularly when they came into power with barrel of the gun instead of going for elections or something like that. Now, do you believe Taliban are in a situation at the moment, because there are other regional powers as well who are quite interested to enjoy the dividend of connectivity that Afghanistan has to offer? Do Taliban at the moment have the capacity and muscle to offer this luxury to the neighboring nations?
In my view, yes, they have the capacity, given that they have been given recognition, because if you see their international diplomacy is going very well with other countries. But obviously, as Sir said, all the countries, especially China and Iran, are moving slowly forward, and they are looking how situation evolves. So given the diplomacy, and I would say that the education issue and the women rights issue, it's not an issue. I guess they are using it as a chip for the recognition. that okay, if you want to have secure the women rights and education and all that, you have to recognize us. So I guess the Taliban over the years they have learned, but they are just using it as a chip for them because it's just, it has a sensitivity involved with the international community and organization. So they have also signaled that they are okay with, they will open up the schools given a framework and women can work in a certain environment. So they are in a position, they are in control, they know their country very well, and they have been in power as before in 1994 and that time. So they can do things, and they have showed that they have a strong command and control system. But one thing which I fear, that being a Pashtun myself, if you read any of the history book, they are always written the Pashtun tribes invaded this, Pashtun tribes were victorious. There's not a name of the king except for the few places, Abdali, etc. So when there was a situation of war, there was strict command and control system because they were one leader and they were fighting against the invaders. But now that they are in the power corridors, so the tribalism should not emerge, but I see it as an emerging, because now the local commanders might act independently. Similar is the case with Iran and Afghanistan. The IAEA from the center said that that was not a policy. They were not asked to open fire on the Iranian borders, and we don't want conflict with Iran. But the local commander was threatening. So I guess that's the problem, the tribalism, which now we see emerging. But both sides, given the top leadership of Afghan or the Taliban, they are tribal people, they are very cool-minded, and Iranian, they also want diplomacy, and they said the aim is stability and the peace. I guess they can sit and resolve the issues once it is issued, because the main problem is Iran-Afghanistan due to ethnic and sectarian issue. And with us, Afghanistan and Pakistan, there are a few issues which need to be resolved. The Taliban also need to have something in their bag, so the world has to give them, if not a formal recognition, but assurances that we are okay with you. There is a working relationship which is just resuming with China, Russia.
Saddam, let us come to this later. Dr. We are talking about Iran, and it is generally observed that Iran's policies have started shifting. They are more focused on trade, bringing economic dividend to the people. And many critics would say that this has happened after seeing massive protests, whether on line of religion or ethnicity or whatever. But Iranians believe that it's because of the economic problems that they have been facing, they are facing to this date, because of the sanctions. We have seen Iran's president going to Indonesia very recently. He's trying to connect with powers like China and countries like India. So what's your take on that?
I think there's a growing realization amongst the ruling clergy also in Iran that Iran needs to open up, and it has been strangulated economically for far too long, and now is the time, once there is a democratic administration in the United States, they are showing a lot of flexibility on JCPOA, and that should give a lot of positive leverage despite concerns of countries like Israel. The rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, brokered by China, is also a consequence of $100 billion US dollars trade between China and Iran, which acts as a clout. So the geopolitics is no longer driving. It's my humble reckoning that economics has started trumping the geopolitics, and those economic compulsions. There was a trust deficit between Pakistan and Iran in the past, between Saudi Arabia. There was a time that Iranians were concerned that Taliban might be used as proxies against Iran by Saudis. But those fears are no longer a reality nowadays because of this rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran at one place, and the stabilization of Syrian situation. The Syria has been encouraged back into the Arab League. So there are positive developments on Middle East landscape which are impacting Iranian policies and having a positive spin-off effect vis-a-vis their policies with Afghanistan. In the past, there was a negative nexus, so to speak, during the US occupation. Pakistan was branded as using Taliban as proxies, and there was a nexus where Russia was giving arms to Iran, and Iran was funneling those arms into Afghanistan, and India was also part of this equation. So that equation no longer exists. The positive thing is that the SCO countries even have issued a statement for the recognition, contingent upon the international recognition, but still it's a major. So Pakistan's interests and the China's interest in the shape of this connectivity projects, part of BRI, CPEC, and Chinese interests in their connectivity and their economic integration with Iran, wherein a 25 years old agreement has been signed, $400 billion have been pledged. So if that has to come to fruition, then Pakistan becomes the centerpiece and the locus of the economic connectivity and the political integration in the region. So political integration and the economic integration, these will go hand in hand with economics in the ascendant. So I think that way Taliban at this moment need to be encouraged to have good relations, and these minor irritants like the border conflict over water issue, I think those could be, because as upper riparian, Afghanistan is much more cognizant of international law. When it comes to Pakistan, the Kabul River that flows into Pakistan, there are studies which show that the Afghans, they don't have much territory for large dams. So much of the fears are unfounded.
Dr. Point well taken. Saddam, you are quite appreciative of diplomacy that Taliban, you believe, have opted for. It is generally found that they are using, they're opting for the use of coercive means where diplomacy could have been an option. And I say this because, as Dr. Shab also identified, the skirmish with Pakistan on Chaman border, while Pakistan is on forefront to normalize their relationship with the rest of the world. We say this because of what has happened with Iran recently, despite the fact that Iran, as a very strong country, is a very strong nation, has much to offer. So why are you still optimistic about their use of diplomacy?
I believe that the central leadership and top leadership, I see them as cool-minded and diplomatic in nature, and they want good neighborly relations with every country. What I explained earlier is that they are not a proper army. They were fighting a guerrilla warfare. So now it is acting as a proper army. So controlling the local commanders which are on the borders, so that tribalism mindset that I don't have to take order from the top. If I see an issue, I resolve it myself on my own right at the spot. So because there are statements from the central leadership that that was not the policy, that was not the order, even with Pakistan and with Iran. And their statement was very diplomatic in nature, that we want peace and we want diplomacy and we can sit on the table, we can resolve the issue both with Pakistan and Iran, and that we should not create it as an issue out of it. We should just nip the bud in
evil in the bud.
Yeah, evil in the bud. So I see it as this way, but they need to control, to train their local commanders that now we are in power, we don't have to act on your own. So there are the training issue is there. So I guess they need to, and they will evolve over time. It's a new, they have taken the power after so long. So I guess they have to come out of that mindset. But the central leadership, we have seen they are very good on international diplomacy, both with the neighborly countries. But the issue is on the other side as well. The countries, not on the side of Afghanistan, because nobody is willing to take a step forward alone. They want to take a step forward together, because in the history we recognize Afghanistan and UAE and Saudi Arabia, so they are blamed even till now. So the countries, the Russia, China and Pakistan may want to engage with Afghanistan, formally recognizing them, but nobody wants to take a step alone. They are expecting a regional approach, like a bloc of countries should recognize at once as a bloc, as a region, So I guess who would drink the cat, the bell the cat. So I guess that kind of phenomena is there, that who will take the first step.
Who will be the first drop of the rain?
One country would take the first step and others will follow, at least in the region. So I guess this is a tricky question, kind of a game theory, that who will take the first step and how the response
Dr.
will come
Janjua,
in.
you just mentioned JCPOA, and it reminds us that JCPOA was quite in limelight for some time, but we haven't heard of any recent development so far. So where is the deadlock? What is happening? What is the status of JCPOA at the moment?
I think the deadlock was on the UN conditionalities about the missile program.
UN conditionalities?
US
conditionalities. Yeah. Okay.
Iran jealously guards that. They say that our missile program is not linked with our nuclear peaceful development, and which they retain, they jealously guard. So therein the JCPOA is linked with that. That is why it is not being finally clinched. But there is flexibility on US part, and I think quite contrary to the Trump administration, which had revoked JCPOA, United States overtures to reinvigorate this is going to be a very important component in establishing an architecture of peaceful nuclear development, which would be in the interest of Iran as well as the rest of the world. And let's hope that that process is not derailed, and Iran.
But Dr. quickly, we are just running out of time. Quickly, this is stalemate. Do you believe it is in favor of Iran, or is it in favor of somebody else? Because we are not seeing any breakthrough in it, despite the fact that it was expected for quite long.
There are detractors, and there are countries which exert very strong influence on both Capitol Hill and Washington, and they do not see JCPOA as a peace deal. They see something which will give kind of a legitimacy to Iranian efforts. So I think that needs to be.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rashid. Thank you very much, Saddam Hussein, for being guest in the program. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a break and we'll join you back with second segment of the program. Stay with us. Welcome back. Ladies and gentlemen, today Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has taken oath for another term. He has taken another term after being in power for straight 21 years. And this term will go for another 5 years, making him the longest serving president of the history of the nation. Importantly, the Western media had been pinning hopes that Recep Tayyip Erdogan might not be able to win the elections, given the economic challenges that Turkey has been facing thus far. Let me bring this to your knowledge that Turkey's economy has been badly dented in the aftermath of COVID crisis, and the inflation in Turkey was over 80% at some point of time, despite the fact that Erdogan went into the election, not only won it, but surprised all of his critics in the rest of the world. How will this affect Turkey's politics at large? How Turkey's economy is going to respond to the confidence of the people on their leadership? All of this in this segment of program. Team Fault Lines have prepared a package. Watch the package before I bring my first guest to this part of the program.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has won re-election in a presidential election runoff, according to country's Supreme Election Council. 6 opposition groups had formed an unprecedented unified bloc behind Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu to try to defeat Erdogan, but he managed to secure another 5-year presidential term. Speaking to thousands of his supporters outside the presidential complex in Ankara, Erdogan said that now was the time to put aside all the debates and conflicts regarding the election period. Touching upon a central theme of elections, Erdogan emphasized that the most urgent issue in the country is currently inflation, adding that it is not difficult to solve the problem. Erdogan added that healing the wounds of the February earthquakes and rebuilding the cities and towns destroyed in the natural disaster would continue to be among his priorities. World leaders are sending congratulatory messages to Tayyip Erdogan on historic win. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif described the long-reigning Turkish leader as a pillar of strength for the oppressed Muslims as well as ardent voice of the inalienable rights. High-stakes election ultimately decided the fate of key NATO ally and regional power broker at a time when world is bracing for tumultuous geopolitical shifts.
Ladies and gentlemen, from the heartland of Turkey, Ankara, where this oath-taking ceremony has taken place, which is also attended by Pakistan's Prime Minister M.E Shehbaz Sharif, I am joined by Professor Dr. Yucel, who is a political commentator as well as a professor from University of Ankara. Professor Yucel, I welcome you to the show. What has brought success for President Recep Tayyip Erdogan despite all the political and economic challenges that he was facing?
The success of Erdogan over 21 years in power, I think there are some specific reasons for that. First of all, internally, before Erdogan's administration, Turkey had very significant economic problems and infrastructure problems. The first and the foremost success of AK Party and Erdogan was to improve the economic situation significantly, raise the income level for all people, and provide public services more, common to all people, especially for those who are relatively, with lower wages, in health sector, in many other, basic, public services, almost everything has been improved significantly. The support of government to the people who were in need, has increased significantly. All these kind of things, technological developments, infrastructural developments, and public service developments have been quite visible and quite common. I think the first reason for success of Erdogan has been internally around this fact. And externally, I think Turkey gradually started to be able to apply, like independent foreign policy, especially against many powerful countries who traditionally, had significant influence on Turkey and Turkey's foreign policy towards their
But Professor
Yucel,
it's very important for us to understand why opposition has not been able to capitalize on the economic problems that Turkey is facing for quite long. I mean, the devaluation of the currency is one of the major issues, which at least was creating a lot of political noise from outside. We could see that. What has been the manifesto of opposition that they were unable to sell to the people?
During the recent election campaigns, the opposition party, actually the alliance of opposition parties raised some basic, arguments like, the democracy, and according to them, the democracy has many problems in Turkey. Human rights has problems, and rule of law, independence of judiciary, and these kind of, arguments around some basic, elements of a democracy have been raised by opposition parties as significant, problems in Turkey. that has been the main argument of opposition parties. And secondly, they also raised that the Turkish economy has many serious problems. And in fact, the economic arguments or arguments around the economic problems have been another focal point of opposition parties' campaign during the election period. So, in fact, the results of elections have shown that there are not actually quite a big serious crisis around these concepts like democracy, human rights, and rule of law. As majority of the people support the Erdogan's arguments, seems that not the majority have seen that there are serious problems concerning, democracy, human rights, and rule of law. And secondly, concerning the economic problems, of course, it's quite clear that there are, many serious problems with economic situation in Turkey. But I think people believe that these are quite, major problems that could be settled again by Erdogan rather than by opposition
Professor
parties.
Yucel, I
Although
think
people see
you have
that-
made the point quite clear. Now, tell me one important thing, and that is with regards to Turkey's foreign policy that had taken a dramatic shift during the previous era of the same political leadership. Now, do you see a continuation of similar foreign policy, or is there a sense within the power circles that this foreign policy of Turkey needs to be slightly redefined in order to capitalize on the dividends?
Erdogan has a quite distinctive foreign policy approach in Turkish foreign policy. He has a very distinctive approach to global issues concerning especially the UN and other, global elements like United States and the European countries. Erdogan has refused to accept their, almost unquestionable effects on countries like Turkey. And in terms of Turkish foreign policy disputes with some other countries like Syria, Libya, and with Greece, and with some other countries like Armenia, Turkey has been quite determined under the President Erdogan's administration, quite determined to protect and to insist on Turkish national interests, despite huge pressure from Western countries and United States. It has also shown itself concerning the Russia-Ukraine war, and Turkey did not openly side with any warring countries, but rather try to act like a mediator to end the war without, further deteriorating the situation to further.
Point well taken, Dr. Yucel.
aggravate
Point well taken. Thank you very much for
situation.
being guest in our program today. Ladies and gentlemen, since we're short of time, let's quickly move toward the last guest of the program. His name is Dr. Bilal Begis, and he is an economic expert who's joining me from Istanbul. Before we speak to Dr. Bilal Begis, let me remind you that the Turkey's major problems that it has been facing for quite some time are the economic issues. Turkey's economy not only was under a lot of stress of inflation, but also the devaluation of Turkish lira was a major point of concern for many, which has certainly affected the lifestyle of many people in Turkey. And despite this, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has been able to again convince his citizenry to vote for him and to opt for continuation of policy. So let's understand from Dr. Bilal Begis. Dr. Bilal, I welcome you to the show.
Thank you, SYED. Thanks for having me.
Dr. Bilal, how do you comment on the success of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan amid all the economic and political environment that his government was facing?
Well, with this really high record turnout rate of around 90% in the two rounds of the elections, including the first one with the presidential and the parliamentary election. Although in the second round, the turnout went down to 85%, it is still a relatively high figure, actually. And it also demonstrates the strong democratic structure of Turkey, I would say. So Turkey has had multi-party elections since mid-1940s. And up until today, we were able to manage to have a really strong democratic culture, I would say. And as for the results of this election, well, President Erdogan, the incumbent president, he already had a relatively huge margin of higher votes, even in the first round. So he was already a front runner. He was set to win the second round of the election. With that head start, of course, it was expected that he would still win the second round of the elections. And this is actually the two rounds of the election. They're also a good sign and proof of the really huge support and the loyal vote potential that the incumbent president has in Turkey. Especially from the mainland Anatolia, from the Anatolian heartland. So almost 50% of population in Turkey, they still appreciate all that President Erdogan has done so far for his country, including the infrastructure investments, the social policies, including the new social housing projects, everything that he has done in defense, industry and infrastructure, including health, high-tech initiatives, and new energy discoveries, natural gas, oil, and even the nuclear reactors that are built in Turkey nowadays. And his foreign policy is also approved by the public. But more importantly, I would say this is basically well, it was a vote of confidence for the presidential system that Turkey had in the past 5 years. So people, in a way, voted for presidential system and for the political stability in Turkey.
And the economy has sharply risen with a rate of 4% in the first quarter of 2023. And this comes to all of us as a complete surprise because of the given economic situation that Turkey was facing. So what exactly has caused this spike in the economic performance?
So the Turkish economy, actually, in terms of the real economic variables, such as the growth rate, you just mentioned the first quarter growth figure of 4%. And in 2022, we had a 5.6% of growth. Before that, it was an annual 11.9%. And before that year, in 2020, we had a 1.9% growth rate. So we do have actually high real growth figures, real economic, positive real economic variables, including the employment, export, production, investment figures. But on the other hand, we do have macro-financial, monetary, nominal volatilities, including the exchange rate volatility, inflation rate, and the interest rates. Even although the policy rates are decreasing, the market rates they are actually going up a little bit in Turkey, as not something we would want to see, honestly. And adding the huge devastation due to the earthquake that we had in the beginning of February, this is actually another huge challenge for the Turkish economy. But from the positive side, there are also many reasons to believe that this earthquake it could also lead to a new process of revivification, regeneration for the Turkish economy with the huge government expenditures and international support, new financing mechanisms that are developed in Turkey, including the construction sector and many other related sectors in that earthquake-hit region, and also considering these new era supply-side policies in Turkey, and they are also considered to fight the nominal volatilities as well.
Dr. Bilal, Turkey's interest rates have been cut down. The economic policies were criticized heavily. The inflation, as we have witnessed, was on 24 years highest. According to some estimates, it was 85.5% in year 2021. So how have been Recep Tayyip Erdogan able to convince people that still steering in the same policies would be effective?
Well, I am still optimistic. Well, we had a record high of inflation, but last month it came down to 43%. And first, with the base effect, and second, with mainly the supply side policies that are implemented in Turkey, including the new projects such as the domestic energy production projects in natural gas, oil, in nuclear reactor, renewable energy, and many other supply side policies that are planned in the Turkish economy. I would say they will be able to help Turkey bring down first the current account deficit, because that is also increasing the external finance needs of the Turkish economy and putting in pressure on both the Turkish lira and also the inflation figures. So still, there is a lot of reason to believe that these figures, inflation and exchange rate volatilities, they will go down looking forward. But on the other hand, of course, we have some other figures, measures to be careful about, such as the huge interest payments over the debt, the external debt and domestic debt. And they have reached a few 100 billion Turkish lira. And they have even doubled in the past few years. So that is one thing we have to be careful about, the huge interest payments. And also the labor share of national income, that has also been going down from 36% in the past few years to now 26%. And we have to work on that as well. We have to use new measures, new policies, including the rising minimum wages, social policies, and find ways to distribute the income, national income, more equally, more in a more just way.
Also, Dr. Bilal, how do you see this historic devaluation of Turkish lira, and do you believe it is going to be a point of concern for the newly elected president now?
So these unorthodox policies, these unconventional policies, they led to huge financial macro volatility. That is a reality. That's a fact. But I would say the problem in that process was more about communication of these policies and the instruments and the things they were planning to do, and also about the management of expectations. So the huge acceleration in that inflation figures, that was actually unprecedented. And if the policymakers, including the central bank and Ministry of Finance, etc., all the related institutions in Turkey, if they were able to communicate those policies in advance, and if they were able to manage the expectations in the market much better, I would say those figures, they will probably be much lower.
And lastly, Dr. Bilal, do you believe any major shift in policies of Recep Tayyip Erdogan, as he's about to decide his cabinet members very soon? So do you believe there are any major shifts in his policies that we are going to witness?
Well, first of all, my guess would be there will be a more market-friendly economic management team at the central bank and also at the Ministry of Finance and Treasury. all the relevant institutions and ministries in the government, they will probably be led by more market-friendly and more respected. Of course, all the leaders that we had so far, ministers and the managers of those institutions, they were still respected. But in terms of their communication with the market, there will probably be some changes in that sense, so that the team of managers, leaders, ministers, academics, or economists, that will be one factor. And also, in this new era, Turkey will actually start to collect the fruits of all the huge projects that it has implemented in the past 20 years. So the external dependence is decreasing in Turkey in many senses, in energy, in infrastructure, defense, in all sectors. It has been going down. And also the huge projects that were implemented in past 20 years, they will start to pay off in the next 5 to 10 years. And these figures, these positive figures, they will also help bring down these huge volatilities, the nominal, macro, and financial volatilities. So these type of factors, I would say, they demonstrate that there's still a lot to be optimistic about Turkish financial figures and macro financial variables.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bilal Begis, for being guest on our show today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, Turkey's politics as well as Turkey's economy is going to stay at the center of attention for many, because Turkey is an important country of Europe and plays a pivotal role, not only economically, but also in the geostrategic settings. Turkey is a guarantor of the grain deal between Russia and Ukraine, which has ensured the lifeline of many African countries, many countries that were entirely depending on Ukraine's wheat. Let's see how Turkey steers out of its political and economic crisis under the leadership of Recep Tayyip Erdogan. We'll join you next week with another program. And until then, Allah Hafiz.